how things can change in just 1 week. US President Donald Trump thought he had Canada exactly where he wanted it. When he announced a 90-day pause on his reciprocal tariffs earlier this month, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney responded in a conciliatory tone, announcing negotiations. Many observers saw this move as a sign that the tensions between the two nations might be thawing. But now, Carney has unveiled a new plan that Trump surely never saw coming. And this plan has massive implications, not just for Canada and its relations with the US, but for the future of NATO, the Arctic, global security, and beyond. On April 19, Liberal Party leader Carney unveiled his election platform, with a bold emphasis on military spending and a clear intention to bolster Canada against what Politico called Trump's expansionist vision.
In this crisis, it means preparing for America's threats to our very sovereignty. I think it's clear the U.S. wants our land, wants our resources, wants our water, wants our country.
According to US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, 70 countries, including Japan, Vietnam and South Korea, have all bent their knee and sought negotiations with Trump as a result of his bad cop, good cop tariff routine. Trump had abruptly slapped reciprocal tariffs on pretty much the whole world, sending global markets into a tailspin. Then, he had just as abruptly announced a 90-day pause in these tariffs on everyone except China, sending markets just as manically in the opposite direction. But if Trump thought Carney was also about to get his knees dirty, what he got instead is more akin to a knee to the groin. Of course, to implement his plan, Carney will have to win the upcoming election on April 28, but the latest polls suggest that's highly likely. According to a CBC poll tracker, as of April 20, the Liberals are polling at 43%, while their main opponents, the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, are at 38%. In terms of seat projections, the Liberals are highly likely to win the most seats and form a majority government. They have a strong lead in Quebec, where they're polling at 43%, and in the Atlantic region, where they have 61%. Certainly, this is no ordinary election in the eyes of many Canadians. 72% of respondents to the CBC poll stated that this election is more significant than the previous one, and their actions seem to match their words. Early voting has seen a record turnout, with over 2 million people voting on the first day of advanced polls. Pre-election polls can be misleading, as the world discovered when Trump unexpectedly turned them on their head to beat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 US presidential elections. But assuming Carney wins as expected, his plan will usher in the most dramatic changes to Canada's military in decades. And judging by the response from Canadians on social media to Trump's oft-repeated desire to absorb Canada into the US as its 51st state, the majority of Canadians will be all for it. And that will have far-reaching consequences. So, what's in Carney's plan? It stands on 4 pillars: unite, secure, protect, and build. The first pillar, Unite, focuses on a range of strategies designed to strengthen Canada's sovereignty and internal cohesion. As the Liberal Party manifesto puts it, it's time to build a future that makes Canada strong. We can give ourselves much more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away. The first set of strategies focus on improving the Canadian economy under the banner of One Canadian Economy. According to the manifesto, that means there must be one Canadian economy, not 13. The intention here is to remove barriers to internal trade between Canada's 13 provinces to combat the negative effects of Trump's tariffs. Carney's plan intends to reduce internal trade costs by 15% and build up trade corridors. This should expand the economy by $200 billion, implying roughly an extra $5,000 for every Canadian. Specific strategies include legislation to eliminate all federal barriers to interprovincial trade and labour mobility, mutual recognition of credentials between provinces and territories, reducing red tape, developing major projects that span provincial and territorial boundaries, and expediting funding and resource allocations for these projects. These major projects include the Port of Churchill, hydrogen production in Edmonton, developing solar projects on Cowesses, building on high-speed rail, and building out Canada's east-west electricity grid, amongst others. Canada will also develop economic corridors, such as to Grays Bays in Nunavut, including ports, railways, airports, highways, and other trade-enabling infrastructure. Other specific areas of focus are the major development of the Arctic region, as well as heavy investments in digital infrastructure, notably AI, and in health and community infrastructure. The Unite pillar of the manifesto primarily focus on increasing sales of local goods and services under the banner Buy Canada. This is particularly relevant when it comes to defense spending. All of these measures appear to be primarily targeted at building up resilience against the threat of Trump's tariffs and a perceived attack on Canada's economy by the US. Protect, the second pillar, is all about protecting our Canadian way of life. Much of the focus here is on improving healthcare with an unsubtle dig at the US. In the United States, healthcare is a business. In Canada, it's a right, the manifesto states. The plan includes improving access to healthcare by adding thousands of new doctors, expanding medical schools and residencies, attracting international healthcare professionals, improving mental health, and increasing payments, benefits, and incentives across the healthcare ecosystem. It also outlines strategies for a wide range of financial and social support for families, women, seniors, young Canadians, and Indigenous populations. The Build pillar is all about growing a resilient, future-proof economy based on a new approach where we spend less on government and invest more in the people and businesses that will grow our economy. This will protect them, i.e. Canadians, from the worst impacts of the unjustified trade war. This includes cutting income tax on the middle and lower classes, and first-time homebuyers will receive a cut in general sales tax or GST on homes valued at up to $1.5 million. That's significant because building new houses is at the core of this Build pillar. As the manifesto states, we will use every tool at our disposal, leveraging technology and innovation to build homes at scale and at speed not seen since the Second World War. This includes providing over $25 billion in financing to innovate prefabricated home builders in Canada. $10 billion in low-cost financing and capital will also be injected to finance homes that support middle and low-income Canadians like students, seniors, and veterans. So clearly Canada is not going to roll over and allow US economic and trade policies to compromise the Canadian economy. Canada intends to fight back, making itself resilient against the threats from the US, plus of course China and other global competitors. But Canada also intends to fight back militarily. That's what the secure pillar of the manifesto is all about. From the manifesto, now more than ever, we need to secure Canadian sovereignty by strengthening our military, making our communities more resilient and protecting ourselves against growing threats, including in a warming Arctic, so that we're prepared to face a hostile Russia or an emboldened China. If the Liberals win the election, Canada will spend $30.9 billion Canadian dollars on defence over the next 4 years and meet Canada's NATO defence spending target of 2% of GDP by 2030, 2 years ahead of its current pledge. To put that into perspective, for most of the past decade, Canada's defence spending has been at or below 1% of GDP, and in 2024, Canada spent 1.3% of GDP on defence, still well below the 2% target. So where's all that money going to go? Much of the new spending will be used to bolster Canada's north. In large part, that's to deter the influence of China, which has been attempting to make inroads with Indigenous communities in the Arctic. For instance, Chinese mining company Shandong Gold Mining had negotiations to buy the Doris North gold mine from the TMAC Resources in Hope Bay, Western Nunavut, but that was thwarted under pressure from national security concerns. However, China is not the only threat to Canada in the Arctic. Trump is seemingly dead set on acquiring the massive territory of Greenland, which would effectively hem Canada in within the Arctic region. Russia has also made no bones about its intention to expand its footprint in the Arctic, which it sees as a crucial new trade corridor and security priority. In December 2024, Russia launched its second armed Arctic icebreaker for Russia's Navy. The Ark-7 ice-class Nikolai Zubov will allow the patrol ship to break through up to 1.7 meters of ice, ensuring year-round access to Russia's Arctic waters. It joins Russia's existing fleet of 8 nuclear icebreakers, the only such fleet in the world. So, what is Canada intending to do to shore up defences against these threats? One way is by building out a network of deep water ports that will enable Canada to protect the Northwest Passage year-round. A priority here is the Nanisavik naval facility on Baffin Island, Nunavut, due to be open for regular use in 2025. Another is the Grays Bay Port and Road, which has restarted its environmental assessment process after being stalled for years. Canada has already committed to building a deep water port in Qikiqtarjuuk, partly for defence purposes and partly to better control the fisheries industry in the region. These ports will be boosted by massive spending on other infrastructure, such as a new hydroelectricity project and other energy projects, railways, airstrips and highways, all with dual-use capabilities. This work will be undertaken with Arctic and Northern Indigenous partners. Another key component of Canada's new Arctic strategy is to develop an advanced over-the-horizon or OTH radar system for the Arctic region. To this end, Canada has purchased the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN for short, technology from Australia for approximately $4 billion. The JORN is an OTH radar network operated by the Royal Australian Air Force that can monitor air and sea movements across 23,000 square miles with a normal operating range of 621 to 1,864 miles. That's a significant upgrade to Canada's surveillance capabilities in the Arctic and across its north. And it's also to an extent a slap in the face for Trump. The US was supposed to be the first export recipient of the JORN system, but Canada managed to sneak in first. The plan also envisages forging a new Canada-Europe Arctic Security Cooperation Agreement that deepens ties in the north in recognition of the rapidly shifting security landscape. It's likely that the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, will be key partners here, given the threat posed to them by a hostile Russia. Denmark is also likely to be very interested in this enhanced security partnership, given Trump's intention to lure Greenland away from under Denmark's control. But Greenland itself may be a party to this arrangement. Greenland's parliamentary election on March 11 was dominated by the issue of independence and Trump's pledge to take control of Greenland. Parties in favour of independence dominated. This led to the leader of the winning opposition party, Democratique or Democrats, Jens Frederik Nielsen, to state that the results should be a clear message to the US and Trump that Greenlanders do not want to be Americans or Danes, but want their own independence in the future. Another key component of Carney's Protect plan is to rebuild the Canadian Armed Forces. Like the US, the Canadian Armed Forces, or CAF, has faced significant challenges in recruitment, including a substantial shortfall of up to 16,500 members, according to Defence Minister Bill Blair. As of 2021, the Canadian Armed Forces consisted of approximately 68,000 active personnel and 27,000 reserve personnel, so the growing shortfall is substantial. The crisis has been exacerbated by the government's recent defence policy, which demands more personnel to operate new equipment and enhance capabilities, such as an expanded submarine fleet and new drones and ground-based missiles. General Wayne Eyre, the country's top military commander, has warned that unless the recruitment crisis is reversed, taxpayers may end up purchasing equipment that could be parked due to a lack of personnel to operate it efficiently. Carney's plans call for major new investment in Canadian high-tech weaponry, making Eyre's warning all the more acute. So, it's no surprise that the plan includes several measures to attract and retain the number of high-quality forces that Canada needs. These include modernising the recruitment process and improving the lot of Canadian forces by increasing their pay, providing better support through investments in housing, healthcare and childcare, and taking a strong line on cases of sexual misconduct. But no matter how contented troops are with their lot, their effectiveness is primarily determined by the quality of the weapons at their disposal. That's why around half of the proposed spending will go to new military equipment and weapons for the Canadian Armed Forces, and the bulk of that will be spent not on US weapons but on Canadian tech. If Trump's plan in demanding increased defence spending from Canada was to compel it to spend more on US-made weapons, it backfired horribly. What new weapons and systems is Canada intending to buy? They cross the gamut from submarines to drones and self-propelled artillery to ground-based air defence systems. Canada's submarine fleet currently primarily consists of Victoria-class submarines, purchased from the UK government in the 1990s. But these have proven inadequate for Arctic operations, frequently spending more time in dry dock than on missions. With that in mind, in April 2024, former Prime Minister Trudeau unveiled Our North, Strong and Free, a comprehensive defence policy update that emphasises modernising the Royal Canadian Navy's underwater capabilities. Under this policy, Canada announced plans to invest 60 billion Canadian dollars to replace its ageing submarines with up to 12 advanced, conventionally powered vessels designed for Arctic conditions. The first replacement submarine is due to be delivered no later than 2035. But there's also the possibility that Canada could revive plans to build or acquire a nuclear submarine fleet. Back in 1987, Canada announced plans to transition to a fleet of 10 to 12 nuclear submarines, which nearly led to supply contracts with the UK and France. However, under pressure from the US, it abandoned these plans. Historically, the US has been wary of Canada's nuclear submarine ambitions due to potential operational and strategic complications. However, given the current elevated tensions between the two nations, it would not be a complete surprise if Canada announced a revival of its nuclear submarine plans. To add to Canada's capabilities under the waves, the plan also calls for massive spending on underwater drones. Canada was a pioneer in advanced underwater drones for various military operations. As far back as the 1980s, it deployed the Thesis, an autonomous underwater vehicle or AUV, to lay fibre optic cables under the ice cap for connecting sonar networks to military bases. Although these AUVs are still in operation today, Canada will likely develop brand new state-of-the-art AUVs rather than upgrading its Cold War relics. UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles, will also form a major part of Canada's new defence spend. And by the looks of it, that might involve cancelling its order of a fleet of 11 US-made MQ-9B Reaper drones scheduled for delivery by 2028. Instead, it seems Canada intends to build out its own, another unexpected blow for Trump. The Canadian military is already exploring counter-uncrewed aerial systems concepts to detect and defeat micro and mini UAS, with funding of up to $500,000 for innovative solutions over 9 months. But the big winner in terms of defence contracts for new UAVs is likely to be contractor Canadian UAVs, which already plays a leading role in Canada's defence industry. Canada might also lean on other NATO partners besides the US to build up its fleet of surveillance and combat drones and loitering munitions. The plan also calls for the acquisition of Canadian-made Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft, or AEWNC. Canada has not operated its own AEWNC aircraft, and recent contracts for military aircraft have not included such systems from Canadian manufacturers like Bombardier. Most NATO members use the E-3 Wedgetail system for AEWNC, which Canada has to date not procured. But all that looks about to change. Another object of the proposed new defence spending is self-propelled artillery. Canada has been modernising its artillery systems, including self-propelled howitzers. It's replacing its 33 US-made M777 Taud howitzers with 80 to 98 new self-propelled 155mm howitzers as part of the Indirect Fires Modernisation Programme, or IFM. While full funding for the IFM programme has not yet been secured, it's been identified as the second highest procurement priority for the Canadian Army, following the Ground-Based Air Defence, or GBAD programme. Companies such as Glooscap Defence, Intermat Group SA, M2K Industrial, Tactical and Patriot Forge Co. have already expressed interest in participating in the programme through partnerships. The GBAD programme aims to provide tactical air defence protection during both expeditionary and domestic operations against threats including rocket, artillery and mortar munitions, air-to-surface missiles, bombs and UAVs. It will include an effector platform such as guns, missiles and directed energy weapon systems, electronic warfare or a combination of thereof. It will also feature a sensor suite, fire control software, and an integrated networked command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance system. While details about the actual systems are scarce at present, it's clear what these developments mean. Canada is getting ready to defend itself against any possible aggression across its borders by the US. Of course, it's impossible to snap one's fingers and make all of this happen. It'll take time. That's why the plan calls for 3 tranches of spending. The first will focus primarily on the rebuilding of the CAF, as discussed earlier. The second will fund the development and procurement of the self-propelled artillery systems and ground-based air defence capabilities. The third bucket of spending will go to quantum computing and AI, a field Canada already leads in research. The military could use AI in autonomous vehicles, war games, and to process intelligence information, an official with the Liberal Party explained during a briefing ahead of the platform release, according to Politico. Where's the money for all of this defence spending going to come from? Carney intends to decrease spending, mainly within the federal public service, and its use of consultants to balance the operating budget by 2028. At the same time, he's promised to protect services such as healthcare, pensions, and employment insurance, as detailed elsewhere in the manifesto. Critics claim the extra spending will exacerbate an already dire government overspending situation, but there are no signs that Trump's trade wars and inflammatory rhetoric about making Canada the 51st state of the US are abating. So, Carney and many others seem to have made the call to stand strong against the threats and to put their money where their mouth is. As they say in Canada these days with respect to Trump, elbows up. But what do you think? Is this new plan the right way for Canada to respond to Trump? Or will it backfire, leaving the nation more vulnerable with serious consequences for its economy and security? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show for independent coverage of global military and geopolitical developments. We appreciate your support.